Welcome to the future. This is Ina Braxton from the Digital Future Lab, and you're listening to our weekly DFL podcast, where we cover the state of the gaming industry, technology, and diversity. Here are your hosts, Samantha Riley and Jesus Govella.
Hello and welcome to the DFL podcast. I'm Jesus.
And I'm Samantha. And we have a few special guests here today. So we'll just have everybody introduce themselves and your role at the DFL, maybe a little blur that you want to add in.
Hi, I'm Nathan Evers. I'm the art director at the studio, and I need to introduce the other special guest hosts today. We have Chewy Ejiofor, we got Frankie Muniz over there, and Tasmanian Devil. It's a little cutie pie. We were supposed to have this on video, but you're just going to have to make do with a bunch of dog photos attached to the video when this comes out.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'm done talking for another 5 minutes, so why don't we go down the line?
I'm Rachel Raymond, and I am the art PM, and I am Tasmanian Devil's caretaker.
I'm Giovanni, and I'm the design lead. I'm also a little under the weather, excuse my voice. And,
My name is Arda Sefi. I'm a dev PM here at the DFL, and this is my debut on the podcast, and I'm happy to be here with all of you.
Yay! Yeah, it's
nice to have you.
Arda's first time on the pod, so we'll welcome him. And I'm also Frankie Muniz's caretaker. Yes, I didn't realize that was his last name, but it was given to him today, so we'll take that. But let's get started. So this is, you can explain.
Okay. Yeah, this podcast will be more about the design decisions and why they happened for Seed. So we'll start off with Nathan, because he can talk more about how Seed began. So the first question would be, how did the idea sort of come about for Seed?
Sure. So Seed was a project that was started about 3 years ago. It was this pair programming project from two of our interns, Rachel Horton and Brandon Drake. And they created this cute little tower defense game. We had a bunch of like wacky assets in there. So we had like Patrick Star, we had like hamburger, like 8-bit hamburgers and ice cream cones and all this. But at its core, it was supposed to be a non-violent tower defense game. Over a few quarters, we had designers in-house, some audio engineers, composers, and of course me. I was kind of one of the lead artists for what we called Hug the Line. That was just kind of this working title. It doesn't really mean a whole lot, but we just started calling it Hug the Line, and so it stuck. And then, another year passed, and we were really invested in Hug the Line, so that started transitioning into what we know as Seed today. So we stripped out Patrick Star. We had like beer tenders and all kinds of like weird little roles for the muses. The muses were originally like these little wizards that cast abilities. Now they're more in fiction and narrative. They fit within our Seed universe. That's kind of the long short of it. It started out as this little Java app, and now we have built it in this fully 3D, our first fully 3D video game project. And we've had excellent designers and artists and PMs and narrative designers come through the lab to really kind of like shape and build it into what it is now.
Nice, yeah. Another question to follow that up. So Seed has changed a lot over the years. What would you say is one of the biggest like turning points for Seed?
Biggest turning points was probably just getting Scout, who was our lead designer at the time, getting Scout and Cora and Elliot and Hannah as our kind of core design team. And they had a lot of, they were writers and editors prior to this. So they, when they were designing, they had a lot of writing and editorial background. So they helped like make a lot of design decisions that were very like narrative focused, and they really helped push forward what we know of Seed today. So yeah, they were kind of building out the back architecture of the entire project, but all of the different gameplay changes, the wizards turning into muses, having more of this like druidic approach, having Jason Pace in the room to kind of steer us away from cliches and archetypes that are very like earth-centric and earth-bound, and pushing us forward to come up with more imaginative magical influences and magical reasonings behind how the planet operates and why you are in these puzzle levels. You know, they used to just be these paths that you would place, you know, your muses or your wizards next to, and they would do their abilities, and we had no idea why that was. And so having like designers who had kind of this like writer's background, editorial background, these like hugely imaginative, creative people, making specific decisions to kind of, you know, lean us and take us more into the direction of, you know, Seed 2019. That was probably the biggest pivot point for us with that project. And also doesn't help to, you know, like put it into Unity, where we've got a lot more resources and tools to make it flashy instead of this, you know, top-down 2D, like flat, flash animation, you know, nonsense that I came up with. But you know, if you get enough like really creative and really talented people in the room, and you give them enough tools, like you end up with something like Seed.
Okay. Do you want to ask the next one?
Yeah. So kind of want, this is just open up to everybody, but I know, thank you, Nathan, for your background on Seed, since it seems like he was here since the beginning, and I know everyone else has come in at different points. So maybe from your perspective, what was the biggest decision that you were a part of in Seed, and how did that process go about? And we can have anybody speak on that.
I think the biggest decision that I was a part of in Seed is when we decided to take out the Mushroom Strider as a mechanic, and the process of kind of like, well, what does that mean for the game? How does it hinder the game? What does it mean in terms of the narrative of the game? That whole process, it was like very intense leads meeting, and not in the sense that like we were mad at each other or anything like that, just like that decision held a lot of decisions that filtered off of it. So it would determine like how the art team then continued the iterations of how the Mushroom Strider would walk or move, and how the design team would use that in their puzzles. So that was like one of the big decisions that I was a part of. And as someone that like play tested Seed back in 2017, I want to say, like being able to see it in that original build a long time ago, and then to be a part of such a huge mechanic decision was really interesting, kind of being able to see the outside and then the inside of game development.
Yeah. Rachel and Gio, do you guys want to describe what that Mushroom Strider mechanic was? Like, we had lofty ambitions, for sure.
The idea of the Mushroom Strider was to have some part of the environment interact with the level, like with the rituals themselves, and make things just overall more exciting. And we had a few ideas for what the Mushroom Strider would do. One of which would be just like a super muse kind of thing, where it would like become whatever it's nearby. But at the same time, it would be traversing on this track that was already like predetermined on the playing field. So it was a really huge mechanic. When Rachel stresses the fact that we ended up shutting it down, it was really huge because it was going to be essentially our final boss of Seed. It was going to be like the last mechanic introduced that added that extra layer of difficulty and complexity, and we just didn't have the resources for it. We didn't have the time for it, especially since we were working on this summer we were working on a tight deadline, trying to get 20 additional levels and refinement of the existing 10 from what we called Legacy into what we now have Neo. So it was a huge ask, and we laid it all on the table, and we were just like, this is creating way more problems than it's solving. And bottom line, that's the biggest reason why we ended up axing it. So
yeah, it would have been really exciting to get it in, but it was also a huge sigh of relief for pretty much everyone, especially the design team.
Oh yes,
because we were kind of limiting ourselves to about 30 levels, right? So we had 10 already made. We were going to add on 20 more levels to add on an entirely different, like pretty complex mechanic from like a user interaction standpoint, and also just from like a game balance and flow standpoint. You have to like introduce that through tutorial. You have to have like several reinforcement levels, and we didn't have like even one of the muses from Legacy, the Uri. It's like a support buff thing for other muses. So we didn't even have that in. So we were just trying to cram like so much into it, and then every little bit that we would ask the devs to do, because we have to have devs to implement all the behaviors. We have the designers try and like paper prototype this stuff out, like really speculative stuff, which you don't necessarily know until it, is workable in game. And then we were like kind of falling behind on a bunch of other like dev tasks and little bugs and other, quality of life stuff. So yeah, I mean, it would have been so cool to get our little mushroom strider just like sitting down or sleeping or whatever on the path, being a blocker. Do you want to talk about like some, not to belabor the mushroom strider thing any more than we have to, but some of the stuff that we were coming up with was like really wild. Like the, you remember, so you talked about the super muse, the bus.
Was a super muse that was, it was essentially a bus. You could put oh my God, it's so long ago. You could put a muse on top of it and it would like walk around. And, oh my God. And then there was the elevator, which was essentially just an obstacle. Like it would just walk onto the path and squat and just make it so that like your tally just can't cross anymore. So the thing you'd have to do is you'd have to place like a muse nearby in some form of fashion so that it would heal essentially the mushroom strider itself, so that it would wake up and leave, so you can do what you need to do. And there were a lot of like really cool narrative ties, and it was all encompassing, from the devs, from the designers, from narrative, from art, animation. It was a mechanic that touched everybody's hands. Like it was just it would have been really dope if we had maybe 3 times as much time. But like,
One of the most difficult aspects, on top of everything you said, with the deadline, the amount of dev, design resources, or just staff resources overall, is kind of the decision that one of the things was, because we really liked this idea, and this is something we had a few weeks in advance. We had during spring quarter, we were discussing it as well. I remember one of the things that was discussed during the leads meetings, that is the factor that people put in so much, all this effort, is like to see it, all that hard work just not being demonstrated, presented in our game. I think that was one of the difficult things, which I totally agree with, because you always want to show people's wonderful work, because they put in all this time and effort into it, and they're very creative and intelligent.
Yeah, that was a really big push. Like at its core, I think the Mushroom Strider had work already done to it. So it's like, there's been so much work done to it, let's make it a mechanic. So it seemed at the beginning there was this force trying to make it something that we just could not do.
Yeah, you really have to not be super precious with your darlings, especially when you're on, like 30 plus person teams, because, you would think that little tiny things aren't going to add up to a lot of time and investment, but they certainly do. And especially when it's something that touches so many different departments' hands, that is time that is taken away from other, maybe smaller, less important things, but that stuff adds up quick.
So how long did it take to come to this decision? Like, I'm sure
Probably
lots of
like
meetings.
3 weeks.
Yeah, I can't imagine it was all in one meeting. It was.
It
That
was a
was-
slow,
It was a slow
brought
burn.
up. It was a slow burn. Let's put it this way. It was a slow burn. There are some people who felt immediately like we should just cut it. And I was definitely within that crowd because I'm very much not precious, but I also have only been here for a quarter. So like it was a lot easier for me not to be emotional about it. Because I
Right.
kind of came in with a perspective of like you were asking for something that is way beyond what you could deliver.
Yeah.
Like it's just beyond the resource of this. And as much as I would like to have people's work shown, are there other ways that we can showcase that work, which is how now the Mushroom Strider is still in the game. It's part of the environment. It still moves so that like animation and the art pieces aren't like just sitting on a drive. They're being showcased.
Right.
Just maybe not in the way that people originally thought.
I could definitely see though if I was in their position, I worked so hard, so many hours, and then seeing that it's not being shown as I'd want, I'd be pretty upset. So I could see that attachment.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about games.
Yeah,
is
I'm
that-
actually gonna sneak off real quick, but keep the combo going. It sounds great.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the interesting things about games is that I think they have art departments pump out way more than they could ever actually utilize. Like, just because they're not sure what they're actually going to be able to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an important lesson to play that plays in with being a PM because, even though with the PMs, you're in the middle between your team members and the directors, right? So, and usually, it's one of the important things as PMs, even if you have power, you determine how to use that level of authority as well. So, and because we can't really emphasize with the team members, like how much, although we know they put in a lot of effort and time into their work, but we weren't, it's always, you always don't know how they're going to feel about that because, you don't want to because you just don't want to damage their, like, hope about it. Because although I was also on the same side, given how much time we had, although luckily we made the decision pretty early, I would say, that, to just not use the Mushroom Star as a functionality, like, because we want to use it as a Snorlax, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Snorlax would be the one that you'd have to wake up. That's why we call it a Snorlax. 'Cause it comes by, it sleeps, it causes blockage, and then you need to wake it up to get it moving.
Yeah. Get a poke flute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like also another thing to consider with any additional features or just things such as fixes, there's always a probability for potential bugs you could create in the game. So this is having to go to dedicate the time to fix those bugs and just sort of you're in a big can of worms that you didn't really want to be in the first place.
Yeah, because this is all after ECCC and Husky Game Convention, and we've already had tons of feedback on Legacy alone that we still needed to address those issues that were found there. And here we are adding something that's so huge that is like game breaking in as a whole. So I'm really glad that we ended up axing it. I was fueled at the beginning by like, oh, don't let this work go to waste for the artists for the sake of their portfolios, because at the end of the day we're an organization that is trying to help people exercise their professional skills and have stuff for the portfolio. So it's like, oh, if we don't have that, then that's like the core of the DFL a little bit. So, but then it just became like, all right, the minimum is it just walking around, not interfering with the game, and we can do that. That's all. That's pretty much it right there. So, yeah.
The short answer was that was a 2-hour leads meeting, though.
Oh.
That was one of the longer
Oh yeah.
lead meetings we had.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine having to. Oh my God, I couldn't imagine having to lead the design team in 10 levels, at least 5 levels, using the Mushroom Strider, introducing it, bug fixing with dev, and asking for more or less features for it. No. Yeah.
All right, thanks for that. So The next question will be a little bit more personal. So, for each of you, what was like one, it can be big or small decision that you had to make that you're really proud of, that made it into the game?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
Yeah. Or one you feel had a big impact that you were a major contributor for.
Personally, I feel really happy that we had a goal of 30 levels and we made it to 30.
Mhm.
I think that's a huge accomplishment, actually, because
Yeah.
when I first heard Ina say 30 levels at the end, I was like, huh. That's a lot, especially since Seed has been out for how long, and we had 10. So, so just doing like just really basic ratios in my head, it was like, okay, that's going to be very difficult. And we ended up having to create a roadmap for those 20 levels, and we ended up having to make at least 4 levels a week, just churning them out and trying to get QAs to test them and get feedback and try to address the feedback as fast as possible.
Mhm.
I thought juggling that was like honestly the biggest accomplishment, because if not, we wouldn't have nearly as much content in the game as far as levels go.
Yeah, it certainly seems like a daunting task, right? The
Yeah.
10 levels, we've been developing it for quite a while, and then
Mhm.
you're asked to, like double the
Yeah.
output. But we have, one of the things that I think is really commendable about the design team for this past year, like between you and May,
Yeah.
and the PM team, like having Michelle and Rachel around to like really do the documentation that is necessary. For scripting out those levels, understanding where we're going to have overlap, or where things are repeating a little bit too much, where we need tutorials, what the flow is.
Yeah.
Those are like little tiny things. All the organizational, all of the literal like management, like day-to-day management type stuff, which really helps the game design process, the game production process. So like it really cannot be understated how important those bits and
Oh,
pieces are. And
absolutely.
like, yeah, and
Yeah, mad props to Michelle.
Like,
Yeah.
for real.
Mad
For
props.
real.
I don't know. I don't want to say I don't know if it wouldn't have happened, but I do think Michelle, being the design PM and
Mhm.
how like driven she is to
Yeah.
check in with
Mhm.
people, and how she scheduled everything out just really worked. It
Really,
was like
really
just the
well.
right. It was the right like special secret sauce, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. And then it only made me wonder, like, how was May doing this before? So it's just like, because I was brought on in January, and to my knowledge at the time, there wasn't anyone that was just sticking to May like glue.
Mhm.
And then so it was kind of shocking having Michelle just like, oh, yeah, what are we doing? And it's like, okay, this is good. This is something really, really great to have that I wasn't familiar with in the past. And like, it's just like, I can't speak enough for like our level designers, Jimmy, Daniel, narrative design from Chris, doing a phenomenal job fleshing out what the world looks like, and also just like Michelle, just our backbone.
Yeah.
Making sure everything's getting pushed along, tasks are being completed, etc. So yeah.
Mhm.
If there was one thing you could change about Seed, it can be tiny, small, anything.
The mushroom strider mechanic. I really think we dropped the ball there, and I really wanted.
You can stop me.
I wanted our like big muse boss. You just like, what was the thing that Naomi created? It was like you could put as many like muses on him as you wanted, and then it like it like doubled or tripled their effectiveness.
Oh my
So you just like
God.
put one of these damn things on the mushroom strider, and it would just like cover the entire ritual. No, so maybe not so much the mushroom strider mechanic. I don't know, like cutscenes, like actual cutscenes,
Yeah,
not
I
just
was gonna
little.
say the cutscenes, being able to have them like. So Jasper did an incredible job with like this concept arc and illustrating that, but I would love to have seen that in 3D, like Imagine if we've had the time to make that in 3D.
Yeah.
That would have been bomb. That is something that like I think about at night. That's how I know that I wish I could like have more time with this project. Is that I think about having that in 3D at night.
Yeah, and having Jasper there, who is a really incredible, really quick, art production artist for us. We, when it comes to like 2D art or like concepts and all that, like we'll get several interns in here, and like they're all at different levels, right? So some of them can just like churn out really, really great production ready assets like within a week. Others take a little longer. So when we were asked to like infuse narrative into Seed in other ways other than like loading screens or just contextual stuff you encounter in the environment or through tutorial pop-ups, if we had the time, we would, we wouldn't just do these kind of like abstract Persona-esque like Japanese RPG conversation trees. Like we don't quite get the scale of, like what the spirit realm is or who the architects are. But, like when we're asked to do something like that, we have to come up with really creative and really, let's say, like quick solutions for this kind of stuff. And although it wasn't in for Seattle Indies, like it will be in there for the final build. And you can like see all the documentation of like what that stuff will look like on the website once we get that updated. But yeah, I mean, like getting actual like environment cutscenes, like that would be the other thing too, is just being able to explore the forest realm a little bit more. All the, excellent little alien plants and foliage and environment props that are all wiggling about, like in the background, that aren't necessarily related to what you're doing, but they're certainly there. And we had a lot of fun with the art team this past year, doing all the variants and all the animations for, plants wiggling around.
So world building.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, world building is very difficult, especially just like on the backs of like one or two people, students especially.
Right.
Because that requires a lot of communication within like different departments. And it's not just like art and design. Like you have to think about like what things sound like, so you have to be involved with the audio engineering team. You have to be, you have to have an ear with like the creative director and all the other leads and understand what they're doing and the decisions that they're making for their work. Because if you have these lofty, ambitious goals and aspirations, like that's all great, but you also need to like sometimes focus in and hone it and constrain it to, like what the team is actually building or can build at any given moment. So yeah, I mean, just getting more world building in there, maybe even having like a bigger team for that would have been great, like
that would have been
just have one narrative designer per team. That would be pretty sweet.
Oh my god.
Instead of just, like Chris or myself or Jason or whomever, just like in a dark room somewhere, just typing out scripts, updating wikis.
Yeah, we definitely ran into that as Samantha and I with the CM team. When we wanted to like showcase some art. It wasn't exactly clear what. We just say, "Oh, look at this cool plant."
We made some good plants here at the Digital Future Lab.
Yeah, but they would actually have names and a purpose to being there.
I think all the names are just like weird placeholders that I came up with when I was just like doing environment prop placement in our forest realm. It's got like a blade fern, coiling worm, glow caps, pimple. We have a pimple fruit in there. That's not actually in Neo. I hid all those assets because I didn't like how they looked at all.
There's the honey light, right?
Honey lights.
Honey light's my favorite.
Shroom stack might need a couple more passes before we're like completely happy with that name, but it was just a mushroom that had many caps
Mhm.
stacked on top of each other.
By the way, naming things is hard.
Naming
Oh,
things is
yeah.
extremely hard.
Do you guys want
Yes.
to talk about level names?
Yeah, you guys should.
Really?
Yeah.
There were so many discussions this
Oh my
week,
God.
like, because one of the biggest challenges with this, because with the game of Seed, it's just trying to refrain from puns. It's so easy to do that. Oh my god.
Yeah. So originally what I had asked the design team to do was for like one of the meetings, just come up with level names for all of the 30 levels. Well, 20 levels, right? Because 10 of them were already named. Mostly because we were back from 6. And we were in the throes of finalizing the build, and I hated looking at stuff like RT1, RT3, just like all of these like, just all these like nonsense like letters and numbers strung together, and that's what this stuff would be in build, and then also what the level scenes would be named. So like anytime we had to talk about a level, like none of us would know what we're talking about because it's like, well, what the heck is like Jimmy Fun Level Polaro Reinforcement for? Like, can we just get a name for it? And so I tasked them with coming up with level names, which, like we should have been doing anyway, like while y'all were doing the paper prototypes. And you guys did an awesome job at generating so much
levels.
content. The one thing I had left out, which I shouldn't
Name
have,
to haunt us.
was we have to, when you're making those kind of decisions, like anything that the player experiences and encounters and reads, especially, y'all are familiar with like the tutorial pop-ups. Like those have to be in a very like specific voice. Those have to be written in a certain way, and we have to be referencing like things from our narrative Bible, right? We can't just like come up with like random phrases and stuff. These all have to be agreed upon things within the universe. And so when it comes to level names, like Ghostlight, which was our previous game, that was a lot of fun because, it's this cartoony thing. It's irreverent. It's got this like broader, more comedic tone to it. Mm-hmm. So in that, coming up with level names is really easy because we would just come up with like puns and stuff because that's the first thing that comes to mind anytime you're like naming a big thing or trying to come up with like a general idea or expression for a level. In Seed, it doesn't really work. No. And what I'd failed to express, which was, just this, one of the like core tenets of Seed is supposed to be this real like immersive narrative, emotional experience that the player goes on, or at least they're supposed to believe that they're transported into this world. And so making like Who Let the Dogs Out puns don't necessarily work as level names.
As amazing as it was.
Yeah. We can't necessarily like reference Nirvana songs or
Come As You Are.
Yeah. We can't like do strain puns with Pill Arrow and stuff like that.
Oh my god.
Trot Along.
Well, Trot Along was
Trot Along is
fine.
fine.
Yeah.
Trot Along is fine.
That was a legacy
I think we
one.
were mostly thinking of like.
Oh, I could pull up the
Why don't you?
list.
Because there were some where I was like,
Oh yeah. Okay.
You were thinking of Star Wars.
Yeah. So talk to us about like what the last week and a half has been like when it comes to those names. Because I kind of dropped it on you, like, yo, guys, half of these are really bad.
Let's back it up a little bit because the Friday before 6 was just me shipping stuff. I was just like, okay, this is what we're doing because there's nobody here at the moment and I'm not gonna let this level be called chicken tikka masala. So I can't do that. So we're just gonna run through some names as fast as we can, because the next time I would see the build would be during 6. So I was just like, I gotta make sure all of these names are at least accounted for, and chicken tikka masala and 69 whatever is not there. So that was like my primary focus, along with whoever was just left in the lab. And we were just coming up with puns because we were just like, this is cool, yeah, that'll work, blah blah
Even though he said no puns.
Oh no, this is prior
before.
to. This is prior to.
I left that
I
part
feel
out.
so much guilt because I had bought pizza. It was like a pizza party day.
God.
We set it all up that there was people helping Gio. They were having like a great
Yeah.
time. I remember everyone's like, "Yeah, we're making a little punny," and I was like, "Okay, as long as you think Nathan will be fine."
And
name.
the only
I
the
remember
only
that.
thing I remembered was like, okay, we try to stay away from like violent themes, pretty much. You know, like let's stay away from those kind of things. So like that's why surprisingly enough, Divide and Unify was actually kept, because I was thinking of Divide and Conquer. I was like, no, we can't do that. That's violent.
Oh, what was the one that I was always ranting about? It was
Collaboration.
Well,
That
I
one
actually
you
was
really
gonna
used, like, ugh. I
yeah,
remember that one.
collab Uri Shun actually with multiple hyphens.
I was looking at that. I was like, what the hell?
That you can barely say that out loud. No, the one that like really is endemic of like what not to do when you're the DFL and also when you have Seed as your project is no Polero left behind.
Oh my god.
So
yeah.
there are. I think I had 3 main points there with it, and this is going to get political
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
So so bear with us. So on the one hand, no Uri left behind. One strike is we're not going to have Left Behind, as in like the book movie series. We're not going to have that in our game. 2, we're not going to have a No Child Left Behind reference in our game.
Yeah.
And 3, we're not going to have a military-esque No Man Left Behind reference in our game. As cute as the pun is.
Yeah.
That may have totally made it into
Yeah.
Ghostlight, but it just doesn't quite fit like the tone and the tone and the atmosphere that we wanted for the game.
Yeah.
So like, I hope it was a learning experience for
Oh,
everyone.
absolutely. Because like the thought process of that one was just simply just like, oh, we're just hammering it down that you can't complete a ritual unless all of the tally make it through. But then I've never heard of Left Behind book series and movie franchise.
This is why you need editors and other eyes. Yeah.
So like again, this goes back to like, oh, if we always have like a narrative person present, we can prevent these kinds of things from happening. But like the rush and bustle of trying to have like 30 names for all the levels was just like, let's try to get through these as fast as possible because we don't have any time left and we can't have some that were just not okay, blatantly not okay.
So let this be a lesson to you all. Have
Absolutely.
a narrative design team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Part of the reason why we just threw it to the design team and PM team was because, you know, like towards the end, like we become a little bit more short-staffed as the studio marches ever so quickly towards the end. So, you know, like we always have to like wear multiple hats at a certain point, and it might not be everyone's strengths, but hopefully it's a elucidating experience for everyone that you guys can take with you and talk to your therapist about.
We took that. I remember that first meeting to try to come up with the names was during a design meeting. And we maybe got through half of them over the course of maybe 2.5, 3 hours. And it was just, before not having the ability to use puns and other references, it was already difficult. Just trying to think of like unique names that make sense for this level, going through like core mechanics and whatnot, and just, oh my God, just going to thesaurus.com and trying to figure out like how do we go around this.
Thesaurus.com.
Like,
how many words are there for a round, pathway, journey,
no, literally,
plan, organic?
You know, like literally so many times we're like, how can we say this in a better way with a better tone and blah blah blah. But once we got our parameters set at the beginning of this week, it has literally been like a daily struggle, just getting as many names as possible. And I think now we're down to maybe three names that we're a little iffy about.
Yeah, corner, whatever.
Sharp corners, yeah, which is just like a literal description of what the ritual looks like.
So,
Yeah, some of the like pieces of feedback I would give to just like help generate names, like in this past week, were like, okay, well, think about the solution for the puzzle. Like, if you could give a hint about what the player needs to do to solve this, or if you could describe the level in 5 or less words, how would you do it? Like, those tend to get you in like a better zone when it comes
That's a much
to
better zone.
to naming rituals. The other thing I would like throw out is the other thing worse than puns is just coming up with alliterative names. And there's nothing wrong with alliterative names, but it is a crutch.
Yes, it is.
And
2-word names.
and just
Two-word
two-word alliterative names. If puns are so easily stretchable, so are alliterations and the definitions of the actual words used just for the alliterative value. Yeah.
Me this week, just looking up all the words like that, because I was just trying to like give us something to like workshop.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember you were trying to look for synonyms for wavy. You found stuff like Terry, Larry.
Oh,
I know. I was like, how can we talk about moving?
I
from
keep
something?
an
Terrying
open.
around.
I keep an open door, like most of the time when I'm working in the office, and I'm just listening to everyone brainstorm stuff. And Rachel, I did not have the heart, and also I had the self-restraint not to yell out, "We are never using Terry in any level name."
No, I just was trying to get everyone to like think of anything. I'm like, come
Of course.
on.
Yeah. And sometimes that's like the other big piece of advice is take a break.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Get some food, walk around,
Yep.
watch a funny video.
We did that on Wednesday, but we never returned.
Although
Oh, yeah.
we nailed it the following day.
There you
Like,
go,
we got
and
them all. We got them all pretty much filled out.
What happens at
Yeah.
Zulu stays at Zulu.
Yeah, anytime anyone tells you like, "Hey, do you guys want to continue working at a place that has board games and alcohol and food?" You're not going to be continuing working.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
All right, so let's just wrap up the names thing, because I was scrolling through the list and I thought someone had deleted all of the worst offenders, but no, they're in a special category called rejected names.
Yep.
Oh,
Due to
many
being
good
puns
ones.
or referencing human cultural references, or just general terribleness.
Yep.
So some of my favorites are pull my finger, which is a hard pass.
Oh,
No, thank you.
I remember those.
Dances with lines.
What?
Yeah.
It's like Dancing with Wolves, but they're thinking
Yeah.
of the lines in the
Yeah.
puzzle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get Gildan, meet the guilds, and my personal favorite is innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah. that was Michelle.
And there's a note here that says too long ? But awesome ?
Also Michelle.
Let's see.
Show the
She
wordplay.
loves puns.
Filled to the gilds is another one. Just can't use it. Oh gosh, what else do we have here? This one is just arrows with 7 exclamation marks after it. No punctuation. That's
Yeah, I
not
don't even
necessary.
remember
Yeah,
that.
I
I
don't know
remember
about
that
names.
one.
Pill arrow, I think we referenced before.
Uh-huh.
It's pill hyphen and then the word arrow.
Yeah, blatantly terrible.
One of these, which is just NSYNC in all caps, styled like
Oh
the
my
band
God.
NSYNC.
What for further clarity and transparency?
Oh, please.
Like these weren't. It functioned as a like brainstorming list as well as just like, oh, let's go with that one. So we had just we're gonna jump off of this onto something else, and just throwing out ideas, just trying to get them all on paper.
Yeah, and
They're
that's
not
the
all
right
to be-
process.
They're not all to be taken like
To be
literal.
clear.
Like we would never, ever, ever in anyone's lives name a level in sync.
Yeah. And then the last one on here is one that we had in the game for a really long time. Managing your steps.
Oh yeah.
Oh god.
And then we thought the solution was just take the hyphen out and it should be fine. But I'm not gonna like go into all the levels of why it just doesn't work like syntaxically.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Anyways, do you guys have any off the top of your mind?
Oh my God.
Particular all stars, or should we continue?
You're
I
just
just
gonna
remember
reject
I
it.
was like thorny edges, I just was trying to
Yeah.
do so much thesaurusing because I had figured out architect with Nathan earlier when we were trying to figure out another like word for deity, and so we had like gone through this fun workshop process, and I was like, oh, I can recreate this magic. No,
Oh, that was a lot of fun.
That
Yeah.
was a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Okay, so on that point, like, I guess just more
More names.
stories about like
Names.
narrative
Oh my
construction,
God.
and trying to come up with
World building.
like words to express what we want and what we mean. One of the directives that we got from Jason at the time, because we just had like placeholder phrases and names for everything. One of them was deity. So we have these characters who are not necessarily like gods, but they're you know like these supreme beings. Maybe one of the original characters that existed on the planet, right? And so they're hugely powerful. They can manipulate mana in their own unique different ways. And so we were just calling them deities because we just needed something to refer to them as, which is a lot of what we do. Is like, okay, we can't be confused during every one of these leads meetings and art meetings, and we're all calling stuff something entirely different. So let's just like settle on deity as a placeholder for now.
Right.
Jason really quickly pointed out like we can't settle on that because we don't want to have like religious or godly or even like a tier system. Like we don't want these characters to necessarily be more important or more higher level than the muses or the player character or the Tali. Like this is a planet in which everything is striving to reach a harmonious balance. So everyone is equal, or everything is equal, and everything is dependent on one another. And so one of the I can't remember what the names and phrases that we rejected were, but someone came up with architect, which was
Oh,
Rachel.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's cool, but it can't just be the word architect. I gotta like
You were trying to misspell architect. You're trying. Like,
Yeah.
I
write
just
it in
want
different
everyone to
ways.
know that's dyslexic or that's like a lot of speech therapy as myself. I went through speech therapy for like most of my life. Some of the stuff that Nathan was writing down made me so angry.
Oh yeah.
Because it reminded me of when they make you learn how to spell it, like how to sound out, like when you were learning phonics and you struggle with it. It was like the same freaking thing that I would see when I would go to my like speech therapy classes, and I'd be like, I like would sound out what Nathan had written down, and I would be like, architect, and then I was like, God damn it. Like it's just like literally like but it's like ARRR like some crazy like Q in there.
I had like 17 post-it notes. This is what I was doing for like a half hour.
Yes, I remember
With
this.
with like just like trying to come up with the most like Xbox Live spellings of architect I could possibly come up
You
with.
succeeded.
Yeah. I had like I had the AE like combo letter from like Ether in there.
Oh.
I got like multiple apostrophes.
Multiple. And I don't even know how to use regular apostrophes. Like I still I don't
Yeah.
you know, honestly, I don't know if we did take any of the otter.
No, not at all.
Just
It was just the
architect,
word
right?
architect at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Oh, that's right, because we thought of pilots. We thought of pilots, and we were like PY,
that's
LOT,
right.
because we were wanting to name like the Spirit Muse having its own thing and having it be called a pilot. And yeah, that was a fun day.
Yep.
I remember, didn't we get one of them correct? It was architect.
That was the one that I think Jackie said if she ever saw it again, she would stab me with a pen. So I don't know what happened to that post-it
Like-
note.
There was one that was like a specific reference. I think you were saying Rachel for Amsterdam.
Oh, Utrecht.
Utrecht.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there was one
that's
where it
the one.
like actually looked like the name of a town. Well, it's not a town, if I may. It is one of the oldest cities in the Netherlands, and it is a very special city because it has a relationship with the Roman, like Vatican, if you Roman, the Vatican. So they actually, it's like one of the oldest Roman cities in all of Europe. So they actually get like special Catholic like things. No, like actual artifacts. Like the Vatican will loan them things. Yeah. So when I saw that, I was just like, what? But yeah, it's crazy. It's like Ultreck. I want to say is Utrecht. I could be saying it wrong. Also, my Dutch is not great. My Dutch is very bad, even though I lived in the Netherlands for 3 months.
Oh God.
Yeah, I really like the Q's and the K's thrown in architects.
I did too.
I mean,
You
it's
know?
cool. Like for the game, yes, but
I'd like an at
As a
symbol in
person.
there.
Uh-huh,
That was
yeah.
fun.
Oh God. Yeah, I'm with Rachel on that one. I wanted less obscurity and more just. All right, let's use traditional spelling. Let's use actual numbers. Let's use.
like I'm okay with like fun things. Like I'm totally, especially if it fits in the narrative. Like let's look at Harry Potter. Like yes, I'm totally fine with it. I just was like, oh, some of these were just. They were so much. They were just a lot.
Yeah. We've had to do a lot of like revisits to placeholders, especially with like the Muse guilds. Like we wanted to have like an adjective noun kind of pattern for all of the guild names that kind of like represent what they do. And so we signed this to Chris Mayo, and it's depending on the day and depending on like how busy I am, like Chris will just come up with like many versions of, you know, like soaring wind or I don't know, whatever else we have, graceful hand, stuff like that, guiding hand. So sometimes Chris will just like give me like a huge list, and depending on the day, I'll give him very like very specific feedback about like what does work or what doesn't work, and sometimes other days I'm just like, nah, bro, this doesn't sound good. And some days I can definitely tell when he's just on thesaurus.com, like, y'all just coming up with, well, it's a synonym. It means the same thing, right? Like, no.
So here's why I always go on thesaurus.com.
Oh, I do too, like all the time.
No, but because I grew up not being able to speak very well, it means that I couldn't spell very well. So I couldn't spell words to save my life. So I just figured out as many words that meant the words that I wanted to spell but couldn't figure out how to spell.
Nice.
Yes.
That's
fantastic. How do I spell beautiful? I don't know, but I can spell ethereal, so let's go for it.
That's a smart idea.
Yeah, I wanted to game the system even as a 10-year-old with a horrible like speech problem.
Oh God, that reminds me when having a pass through the game before 6 and seeing that the URI did not have the that same like adjective noun kind of like format, and like that was another thing that came up with the level names. It's just okay, well, we're gonna call it supporting grace.
And that's the way it is.
And that's just the way it is.
Dude, you came into my office and you're like, yo, we don't have a name for the support muse. What about grace?
So it's like supporting grace or something.
Yeah,
I have to look in the building.
And I was like, yeah, no, that sounds good. Cleared. Ship it. Some days you're just in that mood, or like something hits you and you're like, man, no, I mean, I can't think of anything else better.
It's like, ship, just give us our money anyways.
Yeah. I assume you already made all those changes in the build, so by all means, man.
There's no point going back.
Yeah, were there ever any, I'm sure there was, but stuff like that for like the Tolly, naming the Tolly?
Oh, yeah!
And
Oh, my
yeah.
gosh.
I don't even know, man.
I still like potato farm. Foxes.
Okay, so none of you were in, and I will try and like on my phone find the list of original seed names.
Uh-huh.
Oh my god.
When we were trying to like brainstorm, and if you, Rachel, think that what I was doing to architect was the devil's work, I promise you, the ways in which people were trying to like once we settled on the name seed, the ways in which people
I'm
tortured
sure.
that word to make it fun. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I'm sure Scout and I would exchange words.
Oh, Scout was there. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The naming of the game post Hug the Line, that was a really fun meeting, and none of y'all were there. But I will hunt now. Tali names.
Oh, and some of those original names are still in the build, just on the editor side.
Oh, in Unity.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
Unity. It's like
What are our Tali names?
Potato Fox.
Potato Fox.
No.
And
What are our Tali names?
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
There's
See what I
Fentrots,
Oh.
Fentrots, Turboa, and Polaro.
Yeah.
It took me so long to actually learn every single tally, just because I'm living in the Unity editor. Just
Yeah.
like, okay, I see Fatapillar.
Yep.
Yeah, and so like, yeah.
Fat Pillar, yeah.
I was never happy with Fatapillar, and the only reason it was named that way was the artist who did the concept for it just called it a Fatapillar because it's literally a fat caterpillar.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, we can't have like just fat in our name. Can we just do something else with it? And then so the solution they came up with was just PHAT, and I was like, all right, well this is gonna change soon, but I guess we'll just have it for now. And 2019, it's still in our build.
Man,
Joke's on me.
Names
Yeah.
of the prefabs.
one
What
of
is
the names, it's like with the Fentrot, the Potato Fox, one of the nicknames, that name just stuck in my head forever. Like, I have this cat, she's like this fluffy potato, and it's like, I've had some pretty weird dreams lately. It's like, my cat, she likes being outdoors. Sometimes she likes to hunt or kill some animals, or she just likes to hide in some little corner. I had this one dream where I was in my backyard and I was looking for my cat. Lily is her name. I'm just calling for Lily. I'm like, Lily, where are you? I finally see her behind this little corner by this fence. She looks like this little potato fox.
No.
My language. Let's take that out.
That's when you know that the game has circumvented
Yeah.
everything. Is when you're
Yes.
having dreams that your pets
Yeah.
are Tally.
Yeah.
I think this also brings up a very good point about narrative and like how you build a world. Is that if you don't build a world that people can feel like they like can pronounce the names or identify with the names or whatever, they don't want to use the language. Like, I think that's like that's why Potato Fox persists to this day, because it like sticks with you a lot more than Fentrot does,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Right.
And so it's harder to like be like, oh yeah, the Fentrots, because you're like, Potato Fox. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, one of the things we never got around to changing or reverting back was we have the placement tiles, the placement blocks that you put muses on. They're called mana plinths, and one that's a pain to say out loud. Plinth.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You also tend to, when you're demoing this to like real human beings, you spit on them as you tell them to put a muse on the plinth.
Yep.
So we talked about reverting it to let's just call it a mana block. It's literally a block and it's got mana inside of it, and we never got around to it. But I think like anytime we
like that.
demo, we always just call it like mana block.
If you want, we can ship that right now. Like,
I mean,
go with the tutorial, we just change it
Sure.
all to block.
Yeah, we
no
got
problem with
some
that.
time. We got some
And
time.
It's so easy to emphasize on P's. It's like things such as like R's, you know, it's so hard to emphasize them, especially with us like being in the United States. With us as Americans, we tend to do that a lot, and so like, it's so hard to refrain from. I mean, even for me, trying to refrain the emphasis on the R's, I just feel like I'm sounding like some redneck right now.
Weren't they called rostrums or something like that before?
Yeah.
I
don't-
liked rostrums, but
What the heck
It
does
sounded
that
a little-
even mean?
you all have like I don't know.
Rostrum is just
Poor vocabularies. Poor
I just
lexicons,
don't
man.
know. I just want to know what it means.
What
It's like a
does it mean?
podium that you stand at. It's fine.
Okay,
That
is it
sounds
Latin?
raunchy.
I don't know the etymology of it, but like
Explain what
it is what a composer stands at. It is a podium.
Okay, so I see
And
the
so we were-
connection 'cause
yeah.
there's so much
Oh,
music
so with
in
the
that
music
thing.
theme, that makes
Yeah.
sense, but
Yeah.
it looks
So-
like it could be something else.
Sure. And also, no one knows what it is. So we're just
Right.
like, plinth is way better. People
Yeah.
have that in their gardens, right? No one has that in their gardens. Only rich people have plinths.
Yeah.
Only
Yeah.
Especially-
rich people have rostrums or whatever it is.
Especially since we
No,
have
you know,
placement
they've got
tiles.
them in classrooms and stuff. But yeah, I think we're.
Podiums?
Yeah, they're called rostrums too. It's all the same. You go on thesaurus.com and
Oh.
put in rostrum, and the first hit will guaranteed be podium.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna call them rostrums for the rest of my life and see how much of an East Coast elite I look like.
Yeah, I had never heard that before.
I mean, you
Saw it.
learn something new every day.
Yeah.
That's kind of the theme of the lab. But
Right.
I love learning more English,
Mhm.
if it is English.
So the first synonym is dice.
Oh, a dice.
And then
Okay.
Dice.
Dice.
I'm sorry.
Dice. Yeah.
Platform.
And then
Podium.
Then it's
Stage.
podium.
There you go. I think you made top 5. So
Did you realize?
A
So this is
soapbox.
why. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. This is kind of why I was like confused. It's also a zoology word. 'Cause
Oh, is it?
It's
Okay.
a beak-like projection.
Ew.
So
Mhm.
yeah,
beak-like
Oh, a
projection?
projection. Okay,
yeah,
I
like
gotcha.
so, like their beak, like
Yeah, it just
their
has a beak.
rostrum.
Oh, okay.
That's because I was like, wait a minute.
So you're like two cons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right, so I hate to disappoint, but I cannot. I think this document or this spreadsheet got, I don't know, rightfully deleted.
Oh, no.
But the only name that I vividly remember that there was maybe a 10% chance of it actually going through was Valley of the Blood Gods.
What?
What?
That was pitched, and all of our designers really rallied behind Valley of the Blood Gods. And then you know, like it came out that like, oh, this is a little too metal and also blood.
Yeah.
So they just like kept screwing with the spelling of blood.
No. No.
Wait.
I have so many feelings.
Mm-hmm.
How was that
I-
even? That was before the whole.
This was
This
post
is-
Hug the Line
Oh,
pre.
okay.
Seed.
Yeah,
I
this
see.
was
Okay.
on the board with Seed.
So this was
Gotcha.
this would we label
Wow.
this like 2016?
Yeah, around there, like
Yeah.
late
Valley
16,
of the
early
Blood
17.
Gods.
That was a
That-
while ago.
That
Valley
would
of the Blood
change
Gods, y'all.
everything.
Yeah,
When
that
you're so
would.
punk, you gotta punk up your game.
I
Maybe
we
forget
can have, like, an
why
Easter
that
egg
was.
thing.
I think there was like a bug or something in the early Unity build or the Java build in which things would explode into like red particles or something, and or the Caterpillars at the time. We didn't really have collision all too well figured out, so like they would just kind of like Katamari Damacy up like on a Tolly.
God. You know, honestly, Valley of the Blood Gods feels very like Undertale or very Binding of Isaac.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that can be our next game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
Valley
we
of the Blood Gods.
separate
Valley of the Blood Gods.
when we break off. Yeah, we don't even need a game. We just need that on a box.
Uh-huh.
Sit in store shelves.
We could
Yeah.
implement it if we made Seed rated M.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, that would be a very different game if it was named that. We're still on the naming thing. I'm sure the Muses also went through a lot of reworks, right?
Not as much. I wasn't really involved in the naming for the Muses. I cannot remember who exactly came up with those. It was probably a Chris M thing, or well, they're both Chris M. It was probably a Chris Maluk task at the time. They were our narrative designer for a year and a half. So I think that was under their purview.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, they did a good job at naming like the deities at the time too. So like Midori and Telusha and Shurin, like all that came out of the same exercise. Halu, Uri, Sepher, all of that. Oh yeah, no, that definitely was Chris. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I mean, we just tasked Chris with that, and then we got a bunch of usable names. Yeah, sorry, there's not a fun story there.
Yeah, we're just like,
Yeah.
haha, people did their job.
Yeah, basically the only like fun stories are like when I'm involved to like cause a ruckus.
Maybe we should just call you Nathan Ruckus Evers.
Nathan Ruckus? I like Nathan Ruckus. That'll be
Yeah.
my hardcore ska band name, like
Hell
band
yeah.
member name.
That's your
What instrument are you
alternative.
playing?
Oh, electric. The what is it called? The washboard. I'm gonna have an electric washboard.
Hell yeah.
And one of those like air powered like harmonicas.
Oh, yeah.
wow.
But it's gonna be auto tuned.
Of course.
I need this
Yo.
right now.
I'll
Yo,
also have
that would be hilarious.
whatever that like musical contraption from is it like Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time, like that big like just giant backpack thing with tubas and
Oh yeah, the big horn thing.
yeah. I'll have that too, just to complete the ensemble.
That would go well with some of the feedback you provided this past week. You just like on the Google Docs note, for some of the names that were just like you're just like, no, we're not gonna have you, but like no. You just play no after each note.
You know, that goes back to what I was saying before, is sometimes I have the time or the mental space to explain exactly why something doesn't work, but also sometimes an all caps no or an ugh really communicates it far better than any number of sentences could possibly.
Yeah.
Short and sweet.
Or a why. Or a how dare.
It's like not on my watch.
How do you feel about the game, Jesus?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I think it turned out pretty well, yeah. Just
Okay.
seeing it, especially seeing it from the legacy to the Neo build, the environment build, that was a huge like jump because I hadn't seen anything up
Yeah,
until
for sure.
I saw the environment build. And I was like, oh wow, the progress is being made.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Especially with the ambience. I apologize for interrupting. It's just the ambiance of the new environment build that we've had for Legacy lately. It's just such a significant upgrade from what we started with. I started around winter, and my first specialty compared to now, it's just mind blowing.
Right, yeah. And also the sound and the OST, getting all that in there was also very eye-opening when it actually happened. Because I'm sure everyone was just playing in a void with no sound. So
Yeah, for a long time.
yeah, for a
Yeah,
long
very-
time.
It takes a while to get it implemented.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary how quickly you can get used to playing around in the void or doing work in the void.
Uh-huh.
Because, like, I was finding that I would have the build, but I was listening to my own, like, TMTM Skyrim soundtrack. So I'd, like, I had video game music playing while I'm playing the video game, and I had to be like, wait a minute, we have our own video game music. And, like, remind myself to listen to it, because I think that, like, especially when you're working, you have your own workflow, and that might include music, so I'd have to, like, remind myself, like, no, there's a beautiful music within this game to involve now into your workflow.
And
Right.
I've noticed that with some users from, especially in our recent demo at 6 at Seattle Indies Expo, like with some people who would play the seed with audio compared to those who don't have very different impressions, interpretations of, in terms of what their feedback is, because usually it was just things, like especially I noticed compared to people who play without audio, they would have things about feedback, things that we already have featured in our game. It's like, but compared to other people who have like different forms of experience, you know, because they just feel like they want that sort of pizzazz when you're progressing through the level. Because it's very different where it's listening, where it's just quiet.
Right, yeah. And also to that point, there's another question for all of you. You guys take feedback pretty seriously, right? From conventions.
Oh, yes.
So
Absolutely.
from Husky Gaming Expo 6, the panel, just to get in, they gave some feedback before we even went there. And then we also got a bunch of feedback from the people that played. So how do you guys, what's the process for taking that feedback and deciding this is something we need to do, or that's something we can worry about later, or it's not valid feedback?
Well, the top of the list is like, is it game breaking? Like,
Uh-huh.
like is it just like a huge bug, for example, that
Right.
just prevents a winnable situation or something of that nature? Another thing is like, does it break the experience of the game? Like, maybe you can win this level, but like the experience is broken. Like there's too many unknowns or too many assumptions going on in their interactions. Yeah, so it's the feedback is incredibly important, but at the same time, eliminating the feedback that is not feasible, but at the same time, like trying to display to others, like, oh, this is we do care about your input, but filtering the input that is actually possible from the ones that are actually, not.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody here has probably seen somebody throw out an idea like, oh, like at a convention, like, hey, y'all should do this, and you kind of like, hey, yeah, sure, or you kind of just roll with it just to keep them positive. You don't want to shut them down because that can have a sour experience associated with the demo itself. So we want to avoid that, but still like carefully filter through, and also just measure based off impact. Like, does this impact every level? Is it just this level? How much does this impact the experience? Like, that was a lot of what we did for when we were having those debates about, are we taking Neo or are we taking Legacy to 6? It was like, well, let's just focus on the feedback from the panels and get as much of that addressed as possible, because like if we can get 1, 2, 3 things implemented in the game that address 90% of what the panel's feedback was, that we actually like filtered through and considered like, okay, this is very essential that we address, then we're really good. We're prioritizing correctly, because we would love to address everything, of course, but just the resources just are never there.
Yeah, and also on that point, when you're talking about getting ideas from people who are playing our game, sometimes it just doesn't align with our essence statement or the purpose of like what we are trying to do with the game. Like we could treat it as like a straight up tower defense, like that could be cool, and we can implement all of these other features from other tower defense games, but if they don't quite align with, the non-violent kind of like mandate, or it doesn't align quite with what we're doing narratively or like how we're constructing the world, well, like, yeah, we'll give you a polite nod and that's a great idea, but we probably are not really taking that to the next leads meeting or the next like debrief meeting from an event,
Right.
It's like the icing on the cake. I mean, clearly you want that the cake, or else it's just you're not going to enjoy eating it. But I mean, if you put too much frosting, too much icing, you're just going to throw up after eating your first slice.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how we felt about the mushroom strider mechanic. It was just too much frosting. Yeah, the players are going to have more than enough.
Oh my god, there's gonna be so many headaches with placing muses with a giant mushroom just walking around.
Oh.
But yeah.
And it's like also what you both touched on is the making sure what it falls within division, because I mean, not to say we don't appreciate the feedback that people provide during these demos of Seed, but just not all of them are going to align with what's the end goal we're trying to get with this game? I mean, even if it's like good, it sounds pretty good, but I mean, it's kind of what we implement into our games. It's gotta be some consistency with the vision, or it's just like you're just creating ambiguity, not just for yourself, but maybe some users who look at that very seriously.
I think something that I have a lot of people ask me, how do I give good feedback? Because I think that we get a lot of feedback because people are really interested in giving feedback, but we're not always taught like the best way in being able to express ourselves. So one thing that I would do when I was trying to understand feedback is, why are they trying to say this, or what are they trying to say? Like trying to recreate the moment in which they actually had this experience, so I could understand like why they're saying that feedback. Because everyone tries or wants to be a game designer. Like everyone thinks they're a designer, right? But I don't want to know why from a design standpoint you think that. I want to know from your standpoint why you're experiencing that. To me, that's more important and more indicative of the experience that we're trying to do, rather than you trying to put on a hat and be someone else. Like I just really got that sometimes from feedback, as people were trying to be almost too clever, trying to create like this super complicated sort of experience. But I'm like, I just want to know why, what did you enjoy about this as a person? And then I get kind of a blank stare, which leads me to feel like, okay, so then you didn't actually experience it to just experience it. You kind of just experienced it to be able to give a critique on it, which is valid. But I also I still think that just experiencing it as who you are is such an important way of being able to give feedback.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's easy for us as individuals think it's just what we want ourselves, but I mean, it's not like when somebody at a booth, at a mega booth, is just gonna say, "Oh, can I see your vision statement?" I mean, that won't happen. Although, I mean, it would be nice for them to consider how they construct their feedback, sure, but it's so easy for us. Even with some video games that I play, it's easy with some flaws or suggestions. I might say, I mean, not like I would message the producers or anything like that. I'm not a stan, but I'll try to think, is this consistent with what's the vision or mission that the brand is trying to get with this specific game? And I would kind of use that to provide some more rationale towards my thoughts and opinions after my experience.
Yeah. The other thing is that a lot of feedback is a symptom of what they're really feeling.
Right.
So digging through that and actually trying to find out exactly why, what prompted them to feel like they need something else in there to prevent that feeling, because they never really say exactly how they feel. It's just like, oh, well, this should be added because X, Y, Z, and you're like, why should that be added? What makes them think that should be added? It's like, oh, it's because, maybe the hitbox is a little smaller. Oh, they're having that interaction hiccup there, and it's preventing them from solving this level because of a hitbox being too small and having to move or juggle muses too much for the size of the hitbox and too quickly, or maybe they're not aware so much of the speed controls and they're not utilizing them as the best way they can. So it's okay, instead of, I don't know, adding a whole nother feature to help to remedy the symptom, you try to go after what's actually causing it. It's oh, well, if they forgot about the speed controls, well, how can we make it so that they don't forget about it? How can we reinforce that a little bit better? So it goes hand in hand of trying to okay, let's filter out how they felt, and then let's try to figure out the process that they got there and see if we can work from there, because it often is way different than what they think it is.
Yeah, no, we definitely got that at 6 a bunch, just because a lot of people are well, I'm just waiting for the trolley to get to the end, but they didn't know about the speed controls, and like, you guys should add that, and it's like, oh, it's already in there. They just didn't know.
It's hard
So,
to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is also a different experience playing a game just to give a review about it than
Oh, for sure.
to
yeah.
just play it. Yeah.
That's why I brought it up, because I love the games industry, and it's definitely an industry that I would want to participate in for a career. But I think if we are thinking about it as a general thing, there are far too many people who would rather play to critique than play to play. And that play to play is such an important part of games and why games exist, that I want to get that back out there. Like, remember when we played things to play them? Like, remember that? Remember when like the first instinct was not to try to like take it apart in specific ways, but just to understand like, why is this designed the way it is? Like, I think back, like, people herald like certain games as being really beautifully designed and that sort of thing, and I go, why? And they can't tell me why, but they can tell me that they enjoyed playing. And that's kind of like, that's what I want more of, if you will. Like, why did you enjoy playing it? Because then we as designers or as the team can understand more of why they enjoyed playing it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more critique and
Which isn't
comparisons.
bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad. Like,
Yeah.
I want that very clear. I love
Just
critique and that sort of thing.
Trying to
but-
find that natural, reaction or, feedback just from somebody playing for the sake of playing instead of for critique. And sometimes these events, the demographics just don't meet that, It's like, like maybe you can get maybe the easiest way to do that is just have younger kids come into those kinds of events, but at the same time, they might, so, yeah, because I feel like a lot of people who gave critique were in the game industry, and I feel like it's kind of like a poison. Like once you see what's behind the curtain, you can't ever like go back to just playing around,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think,
So,
I think of Depression Quest. Like, Zoe Quinn made a game that changed games for the rest of time with Depression Quest. And I hear so many people try to critique it, but they won't just play it to play it. Like, if you just play that game to play that game and go through and understand the Depression Quest, you will be able to better critique it rather than just saying, games can't be about mental health or video games have to be this. Like, actually just going through and like playing it to understand what it's like to have depression is a completely valid way of being able to then learn how to critique it, which is, I think, the only point that people were ever trying to make with making games fit a larger section of games or a larger section of meaning.
All right, and that's gonna wrap it up here for this final DFL podcast. But before we end it off, I'm gonna throw it off to Nate real quick.
Okay, so if you recall earlier in the conversation, I was trying to find the brainstorming doc from early Seed or early HTL.
Oh yes.
Now, where I goofed was I was looking under the Google Docs app instead of the Google Sheets app because it's a spreadsheet.
It's a spreadsheet.
So,
oh, goody.
to follow up on your question about like what the naming for like the potato foxes and turnips and yada yada yada.
Right.
Yeah, we in fact have characters in our game are called the Tali and the Muses.
Right.
They were not always called the Tali and the Muses. The Tali used to be squibbles.
That
which-
makes a lot of sense because that's also in Unity.
Yes, and that was nice and cutesy. So for turnip, we have two entries. For some reason, the For some reason, the Tali don't really have a lot. So for turnip, and I just want you guys to react.
Right.
Give me your like honest,
Okay.
Okay.
like unbiased reactions to these names. For turnip, we have Leafy.
Oh my god.
Get out.
Yeah.
Oh really?
We also have Minip or Minup because we couldn't figure out which one we liked more.
Wow, you guys don't look Pokemon at all.
I'm pretty sure that's just straight up a Pokemon.
Yeah.
That was the other challenge that I remember in the room was like a lot of these were just, is that a Pokemon?
Yeah.
Are you sure it's not a Pokemon?
Or Digimon, or...
Yeah. Any kind of like little miniature monster. For the Fenshots, we have, again, 2 entries. Volpato and Voltado.
Nope.
Again.
What?
Nope. That is Voltron or Vulpix
Yeah.
plus something.
I told him, like,
Oh my God.
yo, it's way too similar to Vulpix because the character just looks like a purple Vulpix.
It does.
Can't call it Volpato. And then, I guess, kind of riffing on that is Ferrato or Ferrato.
Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds a lot like another word.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's like how we should have been marketing this game.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so for Polaro, these are real nice. We have Bratworm
Oh my gosh.
or
Bratworm.
Bratworm.
Oh, bratworm. Okay.
That doesn't sound cute at all.
No.
I'm very angry.
We also have Grubba or Gribba.
No.
Grubba.
Because
I
we
like
just
Grubba.
want to have like
Gia digs Grubba.
Yeah, Grubba's pretty good.
All right. So before we had Tali, it was Squibbles, and here's some of the names we came up for him. Oh, come on, guys. Okay, so I think these are just general Tali names. So we have Leafy in here, Minup, Volpato, Bratworm. Okay, so we have Pinroots.
All
What the
right.
hell is
what
that?
What?
That's a no. We have Otatop.
I kind of like it a little bit. It's just kind of funny. Like if we had like actual narration, like someone speaking, I would love to hear that.
Yeah. Make sure all the Otatops make it to the end of the ritual.
That'd make a good Pokemon, yeah.
Yeah.
I think this one's supposed to be for Polaro. Burglug.
I don't like that one at all.
Some of these are
That's
just
all around just terrible.
Some of these are just nasty in the mouth.
Yeah. Burglub?
Burglug. Also, if you don't like that one, there is Bloodguard.
Bloodguard?
Also Bloodguard. So now I'm seeing why. We had like Bratworm and Bloodguard and all this other nonsense.
When you D&D too much.
So I was like previewing this sheet earlier, and there's some like absolutely impronounceable things in here. So we're getting into that section. Sanguinus.
Sanguines?
No, I said Sanguinus, which is spelled Sanguineus.
Wait a
Oh.
minute. Isn't that not just something from Skyrim?
Oh,
That's something from Skyrim.
my gosh.
Straight up.
Sure,
Because
I believe it.
Yeah, no, because that has to do with the Jabberwocky quest.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
pretty sure. Check me, internet. Check me.
I don't think this one's serious, but it's Sangria.
Oh my gosh. Just with an O.
Rachel's just making a disappointed expression.
Oh my god.
Diffles, deflabbers,
Diffles?
flabbers,
Like
flablings.
DFL? Is that
I
just
think
where
these
that
are
came
riffs
from?
off of the DFL.
Oh
yeah.
my god.
Seedlings. Seedlings, yeah. Leaflings.
Merp.
Petalians?
Merp.
Like petal?
Like
Hard
petal.
Like people of the
Hard
planet
pass.
Petal? Petalians?
pass.
Petalons?
Sounds like Italian.
I think my personal
But
favorite was
bad
saplings. That kind of just works.
Saplings,
Like
yeah.
saplings. I feel like that's just a word that's used in general for
It is.
like for
Yeah,
the
but that
maybe-
goes to like not complicating things with like just fantasy blurbs
right.
instead. But yeah, saplings I think I was trying to petition for, but no one was taken. With petadons, Patali, which led us to Tali, and then led us to Tali with 2 eyes.
Tali.
Tali or Talii if you're from Rome. So those were all of our squibble scribbled names.
Oh my god.
Druids were what the muses used to be. This is much
Oh,
shorter.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
still in Unity
Oh,
sometimes.
yeah. Okay.
We have Magicus,
Nope.
Motion,
Nope.
Moshun,
Nope.
Orwin. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm gonna try. Vuohi. Vuohe. And then we have Ihanavi, which is Ihonavi, and then oh gosh,
Oh my
Zvanus, which I don't like because it's Svanus. And my editorial note would be, we're not having anything that has anus in the title.
Yeah.
Like literally just
God.
anus.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But with a couple extra letters.
With an impronounceable SV at the very beginning. We have Zvanai, and then somehow that led to muses. So we just went with muses. Here are some planet names.
Ooh.
Gosiro.
Gosiro.
Or
That's a Pokemon.
Gosiro? Most likely. I think Aina came up with this one. Sangria.
No.
Sangria, but it's a song. Sangrua, Moseos, Museos. This one's pups, but I think if I know Aina, it's supposed to be pronounced poops.
Oh my god.
Just P-U-P-S. Pups.
P-U-P-S? Okay, if it was I-S, I would be like... Okay.
Esforato.
Ju-
Esforato.
That's-
Esforato.
What
So
people
close to
try
being
to
a
do
car.
when they when you start blending languages, y'all, that's
Zvanus, I definitely think needs to be a car.
if it's not
I'll get Musk on the phone. I got like a new car name for you. Pedonis. Also no pedo. Like editorial note, don't have PEDO anywhere in any of your names.
Yeah.
So Pedonis out. Svagone, which I think I said before.
Jeez.
Stamaria.
Oh my god.
Anaria.
It's so
Aenaria. No. Then we have Debo.
Debo!
I'm just silent because I'm overwhelmed.
Then we got to Seed, which I liked. Then it wasn't good enough, so then we have Seed with a bunch of different spellings. And on the big board in the office, I remember, I think it was like Jason and Aina were like trying to figure out how else to make it more fantastical. So they were doing like backwards E's and I's with like 4 dots and all of this nonsense. And eventually like, I convinced them that, look, no one is ever going to be able to like look at this and pronounce it like when we go out and demo. So just SEED, please.
Yeah.
That should be
That's-
good
Keep
enough.
it, yeah.
Simple, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have a bunch of these like miscellaneous ones. I'm just gonna skip towards this fun part. We have shoe fork.
What?
Shoe for
Shoe fork. I don't know, man. Osdwalin.
I've heard that before.
Oshung. This one, I think someone was just like keyboard mashing.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
OJSERNKG.
That sounds very much like Icelandic.
Yeah,
Like,
right? Which is weird because we've never had an Icelandic
I know.
intern.
But like looking at that, I'm like, that's Old Norse.
Yeah. Voswalen, Ifsiank.
Jeez.
Also, other editorial note. Don't have yank in any of your names.
It's actually spelled Y-A-N-K?
No, it's IFSYENK.
Oh my.
And then I think someone just reversed it because this one's Yilsfunk.
Oh my god.
Seriously, it's like having Icelandic.
Dyslexia?
No, it's just like those all sound like Old Norse. It's like someone
Yeah.
took an Old Norse dictionary and was like, let's have some fun.
And now you know where like Valley of the Blood Gods probably came out
Yeah.
of. Because
Oh,
everyone was
yeah.
just like ticking on like
On the Old
Skyrim in like
Norse and-
2016,
That makes a
17.
lot of sense.
And then there's just this like random like part of the sheet that has like a few extra ones. They're not categorized. We have rash radish.
rash.
That Sounds like a transmitted disease.
Other editorial note: no on
Through
STIs.
Radish, man.
Root fox, big bean, daikon, which is just a radish. I think
Yeah,
these
I
are
was about to
like.
say, that's just a
I think these are Turaboa names. Waddler and Grub Mega. Oh, I see how these are ordered. So they're supposed to be, I guess, 2 groups or 2 sets for Turaboa, Fentrot, and Polaro. So we have Rash Radish, Root Fox, and Big Bean. Cool. And then Daikon, Waddler, and Grub Mega.
What? A Grub Mega is a Pokemon. I'm sorry.
No, you would have to have the Mega in front of the Grub.
Mega Grub.
Mega Grub FX.
You still congrats, you made a Pokemon.
Anyways, I'm so delighted by how brief this podcast was.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're just like inching right in under 30 minutes.
Oh yeah,
So-
definitely.
Absolutely.
Good job, everyone.
Yeah.
We totally nailed it.
Well done, Taz. Good job, Chiwi.
Mm-hmm.
And Frankie.
And Frankie.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was real nice having all of you on for this final podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And thank you so much for producing all these things.
Yeah, thank
Please
you so
do
much.
keep it up.
Yes, we will keep it up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Send me a flyer. I will be on this podcast to regale you with my nonsense.
Okay, so we'll hear from Nate again at some point. Mhm. All right. Well, until next time, catch you all later.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Digital Future Lab and on Twitter at DFL_studios. Tune in next time for more on games, technology, and diversity.